Hello, it is 6 a.m. in Washington. It's 12 noon in Brussels. I'm Monita Rajpal. You're watching CNN, the world's news leader, and this is World One, live from London. In Europe are falling heavily as investors wait for markets in the U.S. to open in just a few hours from now. Monday's session will be the first since Standard & Poor's removed the U.S. Treasury's AAA credit rating. Markets in Asia have closed for the day. All the main indices were down sharply. In South Korea, trading was halted for a while because the losses were just so big, more than 7% at one point. Political leaders met at the weekend to try and restore confidence that the underlying problems are being addressed. The Group of 7 developed countries says it is committed to taking coordinated action where needed, but didn't announce any specific new actions. We want to bring in our Charles Hodson from CNN's World Business Today. He's keeping track of the latest moves to stem the crisis and how they are being received. To say it's volatile is an understatement.
Well, yes, and I think definitely in light of what has been going on, it's very volatile indeed, and probably likely to remain volatile for quite some time to come. But in terms of what's going on in European markets, quite interesting. It's almost a tale of two pictures. You've got banks in the Eurozone, particularly in Spain and Italy, which are rallying really quite strongly, up by 5, 6, 7, 8% in some cases. Banks like Banco San Paolo, Unicredit, and so on, Banco Popolare, are all up because the European Central Bank has signaled its willingness to actively start buying sovereign debt from those nations, to buy bonds in those nations.
Well, thank you very much for that. Well, S&P's decision to downgrade U.S. debt was quite unprecedented. This shows you just how investors across the Asia-Pacific region responded to it. The Nikkei average in Tokyo and Hong Kong's Hang Seng both fell 2%. In South Korea, the Kospi lost almost 4%. Well, for more on the ECB's bond buying plan, we want to speak to Tobias Blattner. He's a European economist at Daiwa Capital Markets in London. Tobias, thank you very much for being with us. What is the ECB's argument to say that this is what needs to be done right now?
Well, basically, the argument is very simple. They didn't have any choice. Exactly last year.
The Bundesbank, the ECB's largest central bank there, the Bundesbank, has been quite against this move. And it seems as though the ECB is going against what the Bundesbank has been wanting, has advised to do so. What does that say about where the ECB stands as well?
Well, absolutely. I mean, usually the decision whether to go into markets or not was never anonymous in the ECB. So there were always many council members who actually were strongly opposed.
Thank you very much for your time. We appreciate that. Well, we want to see what newspapers around the world are saying about these. The International Herald Tribune's headline has groping for ways to calm seething markets. It goes on to say, as much as the U.S. drama and talk of a new recession added to Europe's ills, Europeans themselves must take most of the blame. In hindsight, it might have been easier simply to let Greece default and restructure its debt while propping up the banks affected. But the crisis has moved far beyond Greece. In the UK, the Guardian newspaper's headline is "The cry for leadership goes out and no one has answers." The opinion says no one, not even Obama, who is the closest thing to the world has to a leader, seems able to turn present disaster into a sense of future possibility. We are left with politicians who have persuaded themselves that there is nothing significant they can do to rescue their citizens from crisis. And finally, in the United Arab Emirates, the National's headline, "Only an urgent global deal will stave off a depression." The op-ed says with every month of inaction or delayed response, the bailout bill has increased as the Eurozone's sovereign debt crisis moves from the periphery to the core. A cacophony of dissent highlights Europe's political vacuum. One issue, many views, and you can read all those articles in full at facebook.com/W1CNN. Pressure on Syria is growing as one of the Middle East's leading powers speaks out on the Syrian government's crackdown. On Sunday night, Saudi Arabia's King Abdullah said he had withdrawn his ambassador to Damascus for consultations. He called for an end to the crackdown and told Syria's leader Bashar al-Assad to get on with reforms. While leaders around the world are calling for restraint inside Syria, the situation is getting even more desperate. Activists say tanks rolled into the town of Marat al-Numan earlier on Monday, but the worst violence happened further east in the town of Deir el-Azur. CNN isn't allowed into Syria to report on what is actually happening, but CNN's Arwa Damon is following events closely for us from Beirut in Lebanon, and Arwa joins us now. Arwa, those are very strong words and strong moves by the Saudi government.
They most certainly are, Monita, and it would appear as if the violence in Syria has reached such a degree that Arab nations have been compelled to break
the
their
UN's refugee agency is delivering emergency supplies to the Somali capital for the first time in 5 years. A plane loaded with 2,500 emergency kits has landed in Mogadishu. It is a welcome arrival for the more than 100,000 starving people there, made possible by the militant group Al-Shabaab's pulling out of the city. Thousands of desperate Somalis have fled to eastern Kenya in search of food and to escape the fighting. CNN's David McKenzie is at the Dadaab refugee camp where the humanitarian crisis continues to grow. He joins us now with more on that. David.
Well, that's right, Monita. Here in Dadaab camp, certainly the numbers just keep on increasing. In July alone, nearly 30,000 refugees.
Right, David, thank you very much for that. CNN's David McKenzie reported to us there from the Dadaab refugee camp in eastern Kenya. Well, piracy seems to be the only industry that's flourishing in Somalia. Experts there are saying there has been more ship hijackings this year than ever before, despite billions of dollars being sent to prevent piracy. Is the famine to blame? Well, Jay Bahadur is the author of the book, The Pirates of Somalia, and he joins us now from our New York studio. Jay, thank you very much for being with us. Is this a sense that where it's like a catch-22? On the one hand, you've got the piracy situation, and that is obviously affecting the aid groups that need to be there to help feed the thousands of people who are in desperate need of help. But then you've also got the people who are in such dire straits that their only mode of trying to get any sort of income or money and help is to be a pirate.
Well, I don't really think that piracy is affecting aid delivery at all. It's, as you pointed out in your earlier segment, it's really Shabaab.
Welcome back. In London, police are on high alert after a city used to law and order was convulsed by lawlessness over the weekend. By early Monday morning, the unrest had spread from North London's Tottenham to other suburbs. On Sunday, stores were looted by gangs of masked young people in Walthamstow, just east of Tottenham. In nearby Enfield, police clashed with youths after shop windows were smashed. And there was violence across the River Thames in South London when looters attacked stores in Brixton. Correspondent Dan Rivers has been following the story closely for us. He joins us now here in our studio. The pictures are absolutely amazing to see that this is actually happening in the nation's capital.
Yeah, I mean, these are terrible pictures of this rioting that started off in one area of North London, Tottenham, as a result, really, of a protest about the shooting of a local man, Mark Duggan. He was shot on Thursday.
It's amazing, these pictures that we're seeing. I mean, these stores and historic buildings as well burned to the ground. Dan, thank you very much for that. We appreciate that. You are watching World One live. Standard & Poor's is defending its decision to cut the U.S. credit rating. The rating agency says if the country's economic troubles continue, it could face a further downgrade.
We have a negative outlook, which speaks to a longer time frame, from 6 months to 24 months. And if the fiscal position of the United States deteriorates further, or if the political gridlock becomes more entrenched, then that could lead to a downgrade. The outlook indicates at least a 1 in 3 chance of a downgrade over that period.
Well, in Washington, the blame game continues at all levels, but it all comes down to the president, and that means different things on different sides of the political aisle. Listen to these two.
What is on the ground matters. And right now, the people are suffering. Unemployment is high.
Is the largest foreign holder of U.S. debt, and Beijing's message to Washington couldn't be more blunt. In a series of editorials from the state-run news agency, China criticizes the U.S. for living beyond its means. CNN's Eunice Yoon is following developments from CNN Beijing. She joins us now. And Eunice, just to add to what the Chinese official news agency was saying, I'm quoting the Financial Times here, they're calling for international supervision over the issue of the U.S. dollars and again, for the U.S. to live within its means. But it's interesting how a country that doesn't like anyone to get involved in their politics and their business is really speaking out against another country.
Well, that's right. There's been a lot of finger wagging going on here. No official reaction. However, as you said, there have been several scathing editorials in the Chinese state-run media.
Eunice, thank you so much for that. Eunice Yoon reporting to us there from Beijing. Well, let's return to a key part of our main story this hour, the moves by the European Central Bank to buy up government bonds. The ECB's announcement that it'll wade into the European bond market to stop the yield on Spanish and Italian debt from rising came as just a bit of a surprise. So is this a long-lasting solution? Nina Dos Santos has been following the story. She joins us now. And some analysts are saying that's just a stopgap measure.
Yeah, a lot of talk about it being a band-aid or an elastoplast over the kind of problem. Certainly the ECB, Monita, has, over the course of the weekend, heeded what bond investors have been demanding.
We are back with a look at sport, and there was an unexpected winner on golf's PGA Tour on Sunday, and Pedro Pinto is here with more details. And I'm not even talking about Adam Scott. Apparently a lot of the attention was on his caddy.
Well, thanks a lot for giving my whole story away.
I'm sorry.
You know?
Sorry.
All right, I'm going to pretend that never happened.
Okay, let's just erase.
There wasn't
Hi, Pedro.
Hey, Monita. There was an unexpected winner on the PGA Tour this week, and I'll tell you why. The top 5 players in the world rankings were in the field at the World Golf Championship event in Ohio, as was Tiger Woods, but none of them came out on top. Instead, it was Australia's Adam Scott who picked up the trophy at the Firestone course on Sunday.
Breakdancing out on the court? I don't know about that.
I don't know. Should anyone be breakdancing out?
No, I think that's a better question, and the answer is no.
We should have left that back in the 80s, right?
Yes, exactly where it belonged.
I think the dance is calling it back. Back to the 80s. All righty. Pedro, thank you very much for that. You are watching World 1 live from London. It's quite a plunge to take. We'll meet a woman who is swimming from Cuba to Florida. This is World 1 live from London. We are approaching almost 8 minutes to 7 in New York and almost 8 minutes to 1 in Berlin and almost 8 p.m. in Tokyo. It's a 3-day swim of more than 150 kilometers through shark-infested waters. It's not the usual way to spend your retirement, but it must appeal to 61-year-old American swimmer Diana Niad. She's attempting to be the first person to swim from Havana, Cuba to Key West, Florida, without a shark cage. Shasta Darlington explains what compelled her to take this plunge.
For American distance swimmer Diana Niad, the big moment has come. It all started right here at Havana's Marina Hemingway.
She looks fantastic. Well, meteorologist Ivan Cabrera will have more on weather conditions for Diana's swim in just a moment. But Ivan, we understand you're going to start with an update on the tropical storm Muifa. Where is the storm now, and how strong is it?
We're gonna start with that. We're gonna get to Diana. It's a big girl there, and we're wishing her well. As we want to track her, we are doing so from CNN.com with a GPS transponder. There she is, right there. So that means she's still swimming. We're still rooting for her.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thank you very much for that, Ivan. We appreciate it. You are watching World 1 live from London. I'm Monita Rajpal. Thanks for joining us, but do stay with us. We'll have much more here on CNN, the world's news leader.